Okay, welcome to Storytime with me. It's good to be back in front of the camera. I'm getting used to this. And it's really cold and snowy outside. It's blowing and snowing, but it's really nice and warm in here. There's coffee. There's not much else. Mr. Ben's here. I have his company. And we're going to read some story. Angels in the Night. Remember where we left off last time? Chapter 3 we had finished, and it was just talking about the clinic, and then it talked about the school, how they would drive to school in this Jeep, an extremely rough, bumpy road, and it would take them hours. They'd usually be very late, hours late to school, and very muddy, but they learned a lot, far more than 1 + 1 and how to diagram adverbs. They got experience, right? So, chapter 4 is called A Harvest of Souls. Let's see what happens. Thanks for coming along with this. The small bamboo chapel was packed with brightly dressed ladies and children. Some children and youth sat in the aisles. The men and boys overflowed onto the front bench and leaned in the windows. Even the bank between the porch and the road had a sprinkling of men squatting on their haunches. All had their eyes and ears glued to the front of the church house. It's an idiom, right, grade 5? They had their eyes glued to the church. Behind the crude pulpit stood Mark Yoder, my brother from Costa Rica. He was talking to the people with an earnestness that reached their hearts. The message he spoke was much like his master's, simple and clear, yet profound and powerful. He used real-life examples and illustrations. Everything he said boiled down to one theme: we need Jesus. Mark especially focused on suffering. Since living in Waslala, we as a family had come to understand suffering in new and unique ways. We were one with the Nicaraguan people in this. Yes, you have to suffer in Waslala, Mark said, but that's what Jesus is for. He wants to be very close to you and be your best friend. Everybody suffers here, even the non-Christians, but they don't have Jesus to help them through. They have no close friend, but you can if you want. The week of meetings with Mark did a wonderful thing in Waslala. It brought conviction to searching hearts. People had been observing us and wondering what our church was all about. Our testimony had helped prepare the way. A torch had been lit. Then there was Ronald's family. They had faced a mountain of problems in their journey of faith, and the torch of their testimony burned much brighter than ours in the natives' minds as they saw that their own people could change. Now, using Mark's preaching, God fanned the fire, and it burst into flame. Other dear souls came with fear and trembling and touched their torches to the light of God's glory. Alfredo thought his wife Maria wasn't submissive enough. This is a new portion. He supposedly was a Christian and sporadically attended the local apostolic church. Cheap religion abounds in Nicaragua. A large percent of so-called Christians don't know what discipleship is. Many churches claim to teach the truth but allow their members to go on living the same drunken, violent, loose lives they lived before they supposed conversions. Alfredo's church was one of these, and his example did nothing to endear his family to Christianity. Maria was honest about the fact that she was not a believer, but now their daughter Lydia was going to these new meetings in the valley and was so excited. She came home one night declaring that she was a Christian now, a real one. She begged her mother to go to the meetings too, but Maria wasn't interested. Lydia didn't even try to invite her dad. But Alfredo was listening in on Lydia's story about the new missionaries and how they lived. One phrase caught his attention. Their wives are so sweet and submissive. The devil whispered an evil plan into Alfredo's ear. If you could get your wife to go to that church, she would become submissive. Alfredo chuckled, but God was smiling too. Maria, Alfredo said, almost kindly, here you are at home and you don't get to go anywhere. Why don't you try this new church? Maria stared at her husband. Since he seldom said anything kindly, she decided to obey this once. Besides, this would make her daughter Lydia so happy. That night, Mark's message was especially gripping. He preached his heart out. God reached down in his mercy and gently took Maria's heart in his hands. A woman of few words, she came to me shyly after the service and told me she wanted to give her heart to Jesus. I had never seen this woman before, but my wife and I led her to the basement and set out 3 chairs. We weren't into the discussion more than 5 minutes before all my doubts about her quick decision were erased. This woman was serious. God had gotten hold of her heart, and she was genuinely repentant. For the next several months, Alfredo tried his best to use his wife's new beliefs to force submission. "Maria, we're going to my church on Sunday," he commanded. "Alfredo, you can ask of me anything else, but I've found something in this church that I love. Let me go back with Lydia, please." "I thought you were supposed to be submissive now," he retorted. "I want to be," she said quietly, "but please allow me to go to my church." And so Alfredo's plans swished down the drain. Jesus placed Maria's feet on the solid rock, and neither Alfredo nor Satan himself would ever knock them off again. Several weeks before the meetings, we as a church had been invited to a birthday party back in from Gicaro. Cipriano, the man of the house, was 27 years old. Though he had never married, he lived with an older woman with 7 children. They had asked us to have a service at their house. After the preaching service, Ronald and I witnessed to Cipriano. He confessed that his relationship with the woman was rocky. He also confessed that he had lived a loose and wicked life. He was tired of serving Satan. We encouraged him to give his heart to the Lord and to separate from this woman. He seemed to agree, though he wasn't willing to do so immediately. During the meetings, Cipriano was all ears. The messages went deep, straight to his heart. Soon after the meeting started, he gave his heart to the Lord. Miriam Arauz was a shy teenager who lived on the other side of a mountain behind Tim's farm. She had been attending our church for a year. To get there, she had to wade through a creek, climb a mountain covered with virgin jungle, and follow a winding footpath through high weeds and grass. Eventually, she would arrive at Tim's house and catch a ride with us to the church. Watching Miriam's quiet, serious personality, my wife asked her if she would work for her 2 days a week. Miriam accepted and was fast becoming a part of her family. Miriam had never been out of Waslala and had never even seen a paved road, stoplight, or stop sign. But she caught on very quickly to our comparatively modern lives and turned out to be the best maid my wife ever had. Uni never had to explain anything more than once. Miriam did her work well, quietly and willingly. On Sunday morning, the last day of Mark's meetings, my wife and I walked out the lane to catch a ride to our special morning service. As we approached the end of our lane, we caught up with Miriam and her little sister. We visited briefly as we walked up the steep lane. Then she surprised us completely by announcing quietly, "Pablo, I want to accept the Lord today." My heart flip-flopped. What? Had I heard right? Wording my thoughts carefully, I asked, "Would you like to do it now, or can we wait until right after church?" "Right after church is fine." Fine? It was beautiful. Miriam met with Jesus as quietly and as sincerely as she had with us. For the next 4 years, she never missed a Sunday morning service, and she only missed one then because severe back pain made the difficult journey impossible. Old Duan was so old, nobody had even been able to keep track of his years. They guessed he was 78. He had been attending our church for several months, and we knew his heart was softening toward God. Though the neighboring evangelical churches told us no one could get old Juan into a church building, much less get him saved, we knew God could. We had witnessed to him, as had others, but he had argued every pastor right out the door. During the meetings, he was there every night, listening carefully. The last day, Sunday afternoon, I stopped in and witnessed to him one more time. "Pablo," he told me, "I am planning to go forward tonight to confess all my sins. I have been a bad man. I am tired of my sin. I want to tell God all about it, and I know he will forgive me." I left Juan's house hopeful, but not convinced. Would he really go forward? Most Nikas don't. They are too timid and just come to us after church and ask for counsel. Sunday night, the church house was packed tighter than ever. This time there were men out on the road within hearing distance drinking in Mark's message. Mark again gave his whole heart to the word. Imagine if when we'd have revival meetings, there'd be people standing out on the road listening because they wanted to hear so bad. Mark again gave his whole heart to the word. As he was winding down his sermon, he began to plead with the people. "Would you come forward tonight to find Jesus?" To my surprise, old Juan was already stumbling up the aisle. He knelt down in front of the pulpit, raised his hands toward heaven, and folded them down slowly on his head. He leaned forward against the pulpit. My heart burst, and I wept as I heard him pray out loud. He was almost shouting to God. He was doing exactly what he had said he would. For the first time in his life, he was confessing all his sins to God. The invitation song drowned out Juan's voice now. We prayed for the rest of the crowd as we sang. Mark waited in silence. Juan prayed on, and God wooed our hearts to himself. Though no one else went forward after church, several penitents asked for counsel. I met with old Juan in the church basement. Juan, are you truly repentant for your sins? Yes, Pablo, I sure am. Are you willing to confess your sins to God tonight? But Pablo, I already did. That's what I was doing up there, he continued, pointing upstairs. Seeing the shine in his eyes, I knew I didn't need to take Juan through the usual steps of conversion. The job was already done. I changed gears and we began praising God for his wonderful work in old Juan's life. The next day the neighbors were shocked. Old Juan, aging and ailing, was bent over, slowly walking down the road with his cot on his back. He was moving to his sister's place just down the road. He had been living with Lucia for years, but they were not married. He was repentant of his sins and was abandoning them right away. The same day I was on my way to Waslala. Just past old Juan's place, a neighbor hailed me to stop. I stuck my head out the window to see what he wanted. The man was grinning. So, old Juan was converted, eh? Yeah, he sure was. Yes, but he wasn't willing to marry Lucia or to forgive his son, just like usual. He rolled his eyes. Old Juan and his son had not spoken to each other for months. The neighbor was sure Juan would keep his vow to never forgive him. My heart jumped in my chest as I gladly shared Juan's testimony with his neighbor. Now I was the one grinning. This morning Juan moved to his sister's house until he can get married, and Juan and I just came back from taking restitution with his son. His son refused to talk, but I went ahead and told him that Juan forgives him. Old Juan is serious with God and is now free before him. 2 weeks later, old Juan was sitting at a small rustic table under his porch roof. Beside him sat Lucia, some 40 years younger than he. On the other side of the table sat the local Waslala judge. I sat with them, and my heart rejoiced to hear this unlikely couple make their marriage vows. In the yard, a small crowd had gathered under old Juan's almond tree. Edward and the school children had come to watch the wedding. So had our church's instruction class and the local brothers. Old Juan looked out toward the almond tree and smiled. My eyes followed his. Then I smiled too. My heart swelled as I saw what he saw. A church in the making. Shortly after a week of meetings, Maria Elena expressed interest in joining our church. Her family was the poorest of the poor. She had 5 children by 4 different men. They lived by the edge of a road in a shack that Alfredo, the grandfather of 2 of her children, had given to her. Now Maria Elena wanted to follow the Lord. Was she willing to renounce her old life and live in holiness? What would she do if a handsome rich fellow came around? Was she aware that our church did not give material handouts? Was she willing to stop letting fellows visit her little shack? But she proved to us she was serious. Of her own accord, she felt the need to go confess to several ladies, the wives of the men she had lived with. She knew how dreadful her sin was toward these poor ladies. We went with her to hang out in Waslala. I stood in a patio in the back of the bar with my wife and Maria Elena. The woman we faced was doled up. Maria Elena didn't say much. She didn't need to. Just the bare facts, and then, forgive me. You don't need to ask me for forgiveness, the lady responded. Just God. You're free as far as I'm concerned. Marcelino was another convert who had restitution to make. He and his wife, Veronica, was following the Lord seriously. Marcelino realized he still needed to make something right. During the war, he and some other men had killed a local farmer's cow and eaten it. We encouraged him to make it right. It was tough for him. Would this become a legal problem? Would he be accused as a robber? Would he be interrogated and have to expose others? After studying the scriptures and praying, Marcelino said he was ready to do it. He admitted the whole thing bothered him when he prayed. We decided it should be done as soon as possible, before his resolve wavered. So that very evening we went to the rich farmer's house in Waslala. The old man wasn't there, but his son, who was also his business partner, was. We decided to go ahead. At first everyone was a bit tense as we sat in this man's living room. I opened with prayer, then told the farmer's son about Marcelino's conversion. I told him Marcelino wanted to find peace. I said he had a confession to make. In simple, clear words, Marcelino confessed his wrong. Please forgive me, he finished. I want to pay you what is right. The effect on the farmer's son was wonderful to see. Although haughty and rich, the young man was truly impressed. "Marcelino," he said, "don't worry a bit about that. It's past and I forgive you. I just hope others will follow your example. You can be a messenger to your people. Tell your relatives and neighbors to follow the Lord and make things right. You just don't worry. God bless you." The whole experience was worth it just to see Marcelino's eyes shine afterward. Normally quiet and reserved, he bubbled like a fountain. We made several other trips to help people make restitution. This was a tremendous blessing for me. We could be more exciting and rewarding than being so directly involved in changing lives, and lives were changed. Here's another story of a lady. Marta Marina's story was different from most Nika's. Born with club feet, all twisted and contorted, she badly needed an operation that was not available in Nicaragua. Marta's father was a sergeant in the Sandinista army. Because of his connections with top Sandinista men, he was able to arrange for Marta to go to Cuba for the operation when she was 7 years old. Marta and her father lived in Cuba for 2 years without any contact with the rest of the family in Nicaragua. The doctors operated on her feet and were able to straighten them out, although she still was not able to walk without crutches. Marta also had severe kidney problems and always wore a catheter and bag. After she came home from Cuba, her mother suggested that she go to a local church service and have the minister pray for healing. Marta went to the service with a special feeling of joy in her heart. She had a simple faith that told her God was going to heal her that night. After the message, she went forward and they prayed for her. When she got home, she jerked out her catheter and never had any kidney problems again. In His mercy, God had healed her. Marta learned to walk with a cane. She was 13 when she started to go to school for the first time. She walked to and from school every day. Her feet did not have feeling, so she didn't detect a blister on her foot that developed into a sore. The sore eventually developed into a nasty tropical ulcer. Marta was ashamed of her ulcer, but her mother didn't seem concerned. Marta gave her heart to the Lord at a young age. God gave her a lovely gift of praise, and she praised Him in sunshine and rain. This was her condition when we found her. It was such a joy to go visit her. In spite of her poverty and all the other odds against her, she'd never complained. Her positive attitude was refreshing, and her songs were uplifting. She taught them to us, and we still sing them. Her sore got worse, and finally she couldn't walk anymore. She was unable to attend her own church, so we started to take her out to ours. Soon, she asked to be baptized, and we put her in the class with Marcelino, Veronica, and Reina. This is a long chapter, but we're almost done. Reina was converted before the meetings, though her husband, Chito, had attended services with her at first. I like these Spanish names. He soon lost interest. He was a difficult man to live with, and soon after Reina joined the church, he tried to keep her from attending. They had 2 darling children. Reina was trying to raise them for the Lord. So, let's just stop a bit. And we think we have it hard right now, don't we? I guess we should think again. We have it so good compared to a lot of people in this world. Once the clinic was finished, Reina took over running the food stand. The income was small, but it was enough to provide food for herself and the children when Chito was out of work. Since he appreciated the income from the food stand, Chito allowed her to keep coming to church, and Reina's faith grew. Yes, the Lord was touching people's hearts in Waslala, and we were glad. But suddenly, we were also very busy. In just 2 weeks, we had interviewed 9 applicants for instruction class. This was both a real blessing and a challenge for Uni and me. Interviews for instruction class were not just 15-minute affairs at the church house. We went to each home individually. Our schedules were full. Clinic work, instruction classes, preaching, and visiting filled our days. Over and above all this, I needed some personal time with the chief of shepherds, some family time, some time to counsel with my brothers, some time for private sessions with those in instruction class, and a wee bit of time to make my living. Maybe you can understand why we were considering an ordination in July, and why that Friday evening after the interview with the 9 applicants, I lay out in the yard with a heavy heart. Who would help all these young Christians learn how to walk with the Lord? Who would teach them to pray? Who would teach them to read? Who would help them understand the Bible? Who would go into their homes to help them with child training? Who would help them start their family devotions? Who would give them financial advice? There were so many things they needed to learn. Things they wanted to learn. It would be our fault if we could not teach them. Oh, that's nice. As I prayed out on the lawn, God gave me an inspiration. You've got to get your brethren to work. Sunday evening, I called a members' meeting. Our first formal meeting with Ronald's family included. I presented a plan to the Brotherhood, which they accepted. We were 10 members, 5 nationals and 5 missionaries, plus 4 temporary workers, 14 in all. We were working with 19 converts who were either in instruction class or waiting to be included. I assigned 1 member or worker to 1 person in instruction class. To the older members, I assigned 2. So every member served as a helper, teacher, guide, exhorter, and chaperone to 1 or 2 of these new Christians. They were responsible to visit, encourage, and correct them and see to any other needs. In short, they were to help them learn to walk with the Lord. Martha Friesen was responsible for visiting Maria Elena. She stood, because there was no chair, in Maria Elena's little bamboo shack, gathering Maria Elena's 5 cute children in a circle. She explained to them that this was family devotions. She told them they needed to be reverent and quiet. First they sang, how Maria Elena's children could sing. Then Martha asked little 8-year-old Norland to read a verse. He was the oldest child and the only one in the house who could read. After reading a verse or 2, Martha made several simple applications to daily living. Then she helped them pray. Maria Elena knew how because she had attended a church for a while, but she had never taught her children. Now each child took a turn praying. Those were the first family devotions in that little shack, but they wouldn't be the last. Over at old Juan's place, Juan and Lucia were blaming each other for their family problems. Ronald and Lesbia were there, listening. Ronald began to explain what they needed to do to get it straightened out. Each needed to see his own error and ask for forgiveness. Their own lessons so recently learned, they were helping others understand. Then there was Eldon, out under the mango tree with Ciparino. They were talking about how to knock several more things off Ciparino's restitution list. Ciparino's eyes were shining as he told Eldon about his last experience in making things right. His list was down from 12 to 4. Ronald's daughter, Margarita, sat with Sylvia talking about the bad words that still slipped out sometimes. Tim talked with Marcelino about financial problems. Uni talked with Raina, asking how it went on Sunday when she took her baby out of church and spanked him for the first time. I love these pictures. We prayed we would be faithful in this awesome task. If we were, there would soon be joining us, and then there would be more to disciple. I could hardly wait. One of the young men in instruction class was especially dear to us. His name was Jacinto, our son Jacinto. He had come to me several weeks before and made a commitment to the Lord. We rejoiced with his decision. For the first time, I could call someone both my son and my brother. The next chapter is called Songs in the Night. I'll read the first 2 paragraphs, then I'll stop. One Friday evening, we had a wonderful little prayer meeting at Jicarao. There were several prayer petitions. Then Ronald's wife, Lesbia, said, "Let's pray for you, brother, down here in Kusali. Let's ask him to protect all of you." Little did we know at that moment how much or how soon we would need that prayer.